Hi, good morning everyone. Let's get started with our next topic for this training session, which is on the SAP dialog steps. So whenever a user logs into SAP system, what happens? So here in this particular figure, you are seeing that this is a user which is trying to connect to an SAP system, and when it connects to the SAP system, he goes to the message server. This is the message server. Message server in turn redirects the user to a dispatcher, and dispatcher is handling the allocation of different work process. Say for example, if a user wants to do some dialog related activity, want to perform some transaction online, so it will be sent to this particular work process, that is D, which stands for the dialog work process. If any changes is done by the user, it will go to the V work process, which stands for the updates. Okay, then in case if the user is doing something called printing activity, it will go to the work process called S. So dispatcher will keep track of what activity is being performed by the user. Accordingly, the dispatcher will redirect it to a write work process. See, in case if, say for example, if a user wants to make changes in a SAP table, so it will lock the entry in the table. In that case, the work process E will be activated. Okay, in case say for example, user wants to do some batch processing activity, some heavy activity which will trigger extensive processing and which can take hours and hours of time, so that is the time the background work processing will be activated. And in case if say for example we have multiple dispatcher in our environment, so this message server will make sure that it is redirecting it to the right dispatcher based on the load balancing. Okay, and suppose we have multiple dialog steps, minimum it should be 2. So if we have multiple dialog work processes, dispatcher will make sure that it is doing a load balancing between the different work process, and it is allocating the work process to the user based on the availability. So that's how the login process works, and the allocation of work process is done. Okay, now here you can see there is an instance 1, there is an instance 2, and you can see there is a message server. Okay, so you can see different type of work process, that is D for dialog, V for update. So in V there are actually two types, V1 and V2. Then we have E for enqueue, B for batch, S for spool. Okay, here you can see this, there are multiple number of these work processes. So dialog minimum you should have 2, background job you should have a minimum of 2, and here you can see that this is a central instance that is listed as C, instance A, instance B. So this is a kind of architecture showing you have multiple instances and one central instance, and how the work process distribution is taking place between them. Okay, now let's come to the system dialog step. Okay, here things are explained in more details about the logging process once it is allocated to the dispatcher, how it is doing, allocating it to the DINPro processor, to a web processor, to database interface, and which in turn going to the database. Okay, so next is about the different work process that we saw in detail about which work process is for what purpose. Okay, and how the allocation happens. Okay, that's all actually I wanted to cover in this particular training video. Thanks for joining and have a nice day. Bye bye.